Hi, my name is Sarah Lawton, and today I'm going to be presenting to you about the brain and the nervous system. We're specifically going to be concentrating on a case study about a gentleman called Clive Wearing. Clive has had the worst case of amnesia ever known and ever recorded. 20 years ago, he lost his memory to an infection caused by encephalitis. And the infection affected several parts of his memory and his brain. Sadly, Clive now only recognises his wife Deborah. He lives in a void and only has a 7 to 30 second memory. When you ask him questions, by the time he goes to answer the question, he's forgotten what the question was. It really is like living in a bit of a void for him, where he can't recall the information that he needs, and he is unable to process what it is that you're actually talking about. He lives in a sea of amnesia. He's been studied very, very much over the years, and the infection is created an irreparable damage to his brain. So when we go through our presentation now, we will look at certain factors which would have affected Clive throughout the years, and how some of the processes in his brain that are now not working effectively would have had an impact on him. So first we're going to be looking at the functions of the brain, and what we're going to be starting with is the limbic system. The limbic system processes all senses and smell. So if we have a look here at what we've got the amygdala, which processes emotion, hunger, thirst, and sexual desire. We can take from Clive's experience that the emotional side of the amygdala isn't working effectively as it should be, because he, apart from when he sees Deborah, his wife, where he does get excited and happy, his emotion is lacking around seeing anybody else. The mammillary body is the relay station, memory processing in line with the hippocampus. Now when we look at the hippocampus is what transfers our short-term memory to our long-term memory. So it is part of the station which relays information as well. And again, because Clive has no memory, is unable to take on new things that you're saying or asking, we would devise from that part of the mammillary body is also affected by the infection that Clive had. The olfactory bulbs, which are the smell processors, they link the senses and the smell memory and the emotional response to those as well. So although we don't go into detail about Clive and his smell response to things, we can assess that from, again, the memory processing is not working effectively for Clive. The septum is vision, coordination, and perception. The fornix is a nerve pathway, transmits information to the mammalian part of our brain, which we'll come on to in a second. The dentate gyrus modifies expression of emotions and forms and recalls memory. So where it forms and recalls memory, there is a large part of this, the limbic system, as you can see from what we've gone through, that isn't effectively working for Clive. Now the hippocampus is the short-term memory transfer, recognition of new experience, which is something that Clive is drastically missing. He isn't able to recognise new experiences. He can only recognise Deborah, so we can assume from that the hippocampus has a large part of damage to it as well. When it comes to the memory processing, specifically with the mammillary body, we have a thing in our brain. We have two memories in our brain. We have our factual memory and our emotional memory. And when Clive sees his wife Deborah, it could be classed as a precognitive emotion. So he's actually able to use that part of his brain to recognise her, and he does get excited and happy when he sees her. The next slide we're coming on to, if we look at the reptilian brain. The limbic system is the primitive part of the brain and the oldest section in revolutionary terms. We have in common with all other mammals, and it's made up of brain stems and cerebellum. mesencephalon, the globulus pallidus, and the olfactory bulbs. So it includes smell, memory processing, and many primitive behaviours that are modified by conscious thought reasons based on upper regions of the brain. However, when primal urges prevail, the limbic system and its associated structures take over. Other times they play a lesser part. They play a very strong role in the expression of instincts, drives and emotions, and the limbic system plays a very important part of our emotional response to things. So if you link the limbic system with the cerebral cortex that we'll come on to in a minute, with the mammalian brain, the reptilian brain, having a look at another someone who's actually studied the brain a lot, a gentleman called Joseph Ledoux. He basically describes the primitive minor brain system in mammals is the main brain system in non-mammals. So it just shows how our brains have evolved dramatically over the years, but there are some major parts that have always been linked with us and other mammals. So looking at the cerebral cortex, this contains the primary sensory areas. As you can see from the slide here, we will go over all the senses that are involved in the cerebral cortex. You've got the primary and motor cortex at the top here, which covers your motor control, and then you've got your speech near the frontal lobe. The olfactory bulb, which we covered before, has all your smell processes. Then you've got the temporal lobe here. This is the spinal cord, and right in the centre you've got your taste and hearing. The cerebellum here, and then you've got facial recognition, reading, vision, language, body awareness, and then you've got your touch and pressure with the primary sensory cortex. So the primary visual cortex senses, analyses data in the eyes and around each region, is data from where a specific sense is integrated with data from other areas. So all your senses take in information and process all that information together within the brain. So again, looking at Clive's case, some of these senses aren't effectively working for him within the cerebral cortex. Facial recognition is working, only with his wife Deborah though, so it's not working on other people. Taste and hearing seems to be okay. Body awareness again, and touch and pressure. So some of these things that we take for granted aren't actually working for Clive. Communication between the limbic system and the cerebral cortex happens through the nerve pathways, central and peripheral nervous system, which we're just about to come on to, as you can see. And the link with the systems in order to regulate and monitor hormone secretion. These parts drive motivation and behaviour. So as you can see here, looking at the central nervous system, it is activated through the brain and the spinal cord, and it processes into it processes information from all other branches via the spinal cord. So you've got the pituitary gland here, and as you can see, it comes all the way down through the spinal cord down to the tailbone, and that's our central nervous system. The only part of the central nervous system, the branch of it that doesn't cover, the reflex arc. Now the reflex arc have nerve fibres between the body and the brain, and they can bypass brain automatic reflex action, which prevent us from danger. So when we are in fight or flight mode, which is another part of the autonomic nervous system, which we'll come on to in a second, the reflex arc can be activated. And as you can see here, it just gives you an idea of the pain response. So for example, the hand here touching a cactus, pain response is the reflex arc works and the hand is pulled away from pain. So just looking at the other slide over here, we are looking at the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and it's integrated the central centres. The peripheral nervous system is the cranial nerves, and the spinal nerves. So in our peripheral nervous system, we have 12 cranial nerves, which we'll come on to in a second. And we have two divisions. We have the sensory, which is the afferent division, which is somatic and visceral sensory nerve fibres. And we have the motor, which is efferent division, which is motor nerve fibres. So, and within the nervous system, you also have the autonomic nervous system, which covers the sympathetic, which is fight or flight mode, and the parasympathetic, which is housekeeping and rest and digest. So those two modes are within the autonomic nervous system. So within the peripheral nervous system, as we said, we've got the sensory, which is afferent, and motor, which is efferent. So sensory would include all your functioning with regards to sight, smell, touch, taste and sound, and the efferent, which is the motor, is your skeletal and muscular. And you can see here where all the nerves go down from the brain through the spinal cord and all the way down through the entire body. So when your nervous system